1,000 hooves churned the rain-soaked earth into a muddy mire. The English forces, led by a beleaguered Henry III and his volatile ally, Hugh de Lusignan, pressed northward, desperately seeking escape before the iron grip of the French army slammed shut. Their hopes rested on a single, precarious crossing, the bridge at Taillebourg. It was a narrow choke point, barely wide enough for 2 mounted knights to ride abreast. And the French army waited on the far side, a silent, coiled serpent ready to strike. Louis IX, the young king of France, stood near the front lines, not in the comfort of a gilded pavilion, but astride a powerful warhorse. His sword held high, at Hugh's 27. His reign was new, his martial prowess untested, but he burned with the desire to prove himself a worthy successor to Charlemagne and Philip Augustus. Behind him, the oriflamme, the crimson banner of France and a symbol of holy war, snapped and crackled in the wind, a fiery omen of the battle to come. Across the river, the English banners fluttered in disarray, reflecting the growing panic within their ranks. Their scouts had promised a clear retreat. Now, the harsh reality dawned. They were trapped, cornered between the swift-flowing Charente River and a determined king leading a furious charge. In the days before this moment, both sides had engaged in a tense dance of strategic positioning, a cat-and-mouse game of feints and maneuvers. The French sought to crush the rebellion led by Henry III and his rebellious local nobles, a challenge to Louis's authority in his own lands. The English, in turn, were desperate to protect their tenuous claim to Aquitaine, a vast territory that had been a source of contention between the two kingdoms for generations. Medieval warfare, often romanticized in ballads and tapestries, was rarely about total annihilation. It was a pragmatic affair, a calculated struggle for control over key strategic assets. Castles that commanded the landscape, bridges that controlled vital trade routes, and rivers that served as both highways and natural defenses. Taillebourg wasn't just another river crossing. It was Asterisk, the Asterisk crossing, the linchpin connecting to critical provinces. Whoever controlled it held the key to moving armies, controlling commerce, and projecting power throughout the region. Louis IX's strategy was brutally simple, yet fraught with risk. Attack first, strike with overwhelming speed, and seize the bridge before the English could solidify their defensive line. He understood that hesitation, even for a moment, would mean forfeiting the initiative, allowing the English to dig in and turn the bridge into a bloody bottleneck. His brother Alphonse and the renowned knight Geoffrey de Rancon, veterans of countless campaigns, urged caution. The bridge was narrow, they warned. Geoffrey cautioned, his voice grave. Your Majesty, a single well-aimed arrow could stop us all, turning the charge into a slaughter. But Louis was unyielding. He refused to cede the advantage. With a sharp kick to his horse's flanks, he spurred the magnificent destrier forward. In an instant, a wave of French knights surged towards the bridge, their armor gleaming in the weak sunlight. The air vibrated with the twang of crossbows, the deadly bolts arcing across the river, and the thunderous splash of horses plunging into the cold, murky water. The English, caught off guard by the sheer audacity of the attack, desperately tried to destroy the bridge, to deny the French passage. Torches were hurled, their flames sputtering in the damp air. Arrows tipped with burning pitch streaked through the fog like fiery comets, but Louis's men were already halfway across, a relentless tide of steel and muscle. From the riverbank, a cacophony of sounds erupted, the deafening clatter of hooves on the wooden planks, the agonized screams of men tumbling into the river, dragged down by the weight of their armor, the sharp hiss of arrows finding their mark. Then, in a moment of breathtaking audacity, the French king himself charged onto the bridge, his presence a beacon of courage in the swirling chaos. Chroniclers later wrote how his presence turned fear into fury among the French ranks. His personal guard, a hand-picked unit of elite warriors, followed close behind, forming a wedge that smashed through the English vanguard. For a heart-stopping moment, the bridge seemed to vanish beneath a writhing mass of steel, flesh, and fallen bodies. The English forces, already demoralized and caught unprepared, succumbed to panic. Their line shattered. Knights, abandoning their positions, fled in disarray towards the nearby town of Sanks, pursued relentlessly by the French cavalry. The French crossbowman, positioned on the high ground overlooking the river, rained down a storm of bolts, cutting off any hope of organized retreat. Henry III barely escaped with his life, forced to abandon his banners and much of his baggage, a humiliating testament to his defeat. His allies, the local lords who had sworn oaths of loyalty to both crowns, were captured or, sensing the shifting tides of power, swiftly switched their allegiance before the sun had even set. It wasn't a prolonged battle, drawn out over days or weeks. It was a swift, decisive engagement that lasted less than a day. But the Battle of Taillebourg effectively ended the last serious English attempt to reclaim the vast territories lost by King John decades earlier, a humiliation that had festered in the English psyche for years. More importantly, it established Louis IX as more than just a pious ruler. He was now recognized as a commander capable of bold, decisive action, a king who led from the front and inspired his troops to victory. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn, where the narrative transcends the typical tales of medieval conquest. Louis didn't exploit his victory for personal glory or territorial expansion. He didn't march on to annihilate the retreating English army. Instead, he chose the path of diplomacy, negotiating a peace treaty at Sanks. The resulting treaty forced Henry III to formally abandon his continental ambitions, a profound humiliation to be sure, but it also averted what could have been a generation of relentless bloodshed. Louis IX would later become known as Saint Louis, not just for performing miracles, but for the rare and admirable balance he struck between ferocity and war and mercy in its aftermath. So why does this seemingly forgotten bridge, this relatively minor battle, matter so much today? Because Taillebourg encapsulates a fundamental truth about medieval warfare. A truth often obscured by romanticized legends of shining armor and chivalrous knights. It was rarely about endless heroism. It was about strategic decisions made in moments of intense uncertainty, about seizing fleeting opportunities. One bridge, one young king who dared to cross when others hesitated, defying the counsel of his advisors and risking everything on a single, bold gamble. And that single act of courage, that decision made in the heat of battle, changed the course of a dynasty and shaped the future of a nation. Imagine standing there on the banks of the bridge, trembling under the weight of charging horses, the air thick with smoke and the screams of the wounded. You wouldn't know, in that moment, that you were witnessing a pivotal event that would define France for centuries. But that's the enduring trick of history. The most decisive moments rarely look epic as they unfold. They're messy, chaotic, and profoundly human. The Battle of Taillebourg lasted less than a day, yet it marked the ascent of a young king who would go on to shape the moral and political landscape of medieval Europe, leaving an indelible mark on the course of Western civilization. If you've made it this far, you've crossed the bridge with him through the fog of war, the hail of arrows, and the chilling grip of fear. And perhaps you see now why one overlooked battle, fought on a muddy riverbank in western France, still echoes through the corridors of time. History isn't etched in marble monuments or grand cathedrals. It's carved into the weathered wood of a narrow bridge, spanning a quiet river, a testament to the courage and calculated risks that shape the destiny of nations. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this journey into the past, consider subscribing for more stories hidden in history.